Alright, so I wanted to get some stuff done on the bus today, but it is nasty and cold and rainy out, so that's not happening. So I decided to film a few videos going over like pre-bus purchasing or schoolie life steps. And the first one is like the thing that I would recommend to people, and I know fairly certain other people do the same, is if you're not sure, you should go out and rent an RV or a fifth wheel or something along those lines and do an extended stay. And the reason why I say extended is because it's pretty easy to just go out and camp for a weekend or whatever else, or a week, and have it be beautiful weather and be like, yeah, this is great. But that's not how it's always going to be. And there's a lot of extra stuff that goes into it when you're doing it full time. The first time you gotta, empty a tank and it's freezing or windy or gross outside, and you just have to suck it up and do what you got to do, because if you don't have running water, or you can't use the restroom or whatever it is. There's downsides to it. And then just the reduced space. So, you have to downsize a lot, and if you're already a minimalist, that's probably fine. You can just go, yeah, that'll be no big deal. But all of the other things, until you've done it, and the reason I'm saying this too is because I almost chose not to do it. One of the last times I flew out to the West Coast, I spent about 5 weeks, and I stayed in my mom's fifth wheel, and it was gross a lot of the time I was there, and raining and freezing, and having to do, replace propane tanks and empty the gray water and the black tank, and like it was miserable. And I was like, do I really want to do this? But I also lived on a boat for 2 years, and so I know that the reduced stuff, so to speak, isn't a problem for me. I mean, right now I live in a bedroom, like on the East Coast. I just rent a bedroom and keep most of my stuff in here, minus refrigerator and everything else. So I'm good in that department. And I also know if push comes to shove, I can go out in the elements and do it. I mean, a bus is very similar. It's, or not a bus, a boat. Excuse me. A boat is very similar to RV or fifth wheel or whatever else. You got a lot of the same things to keep in mind, with some added ones. You got bilge pumps, and you got, if you're in the water, a lot of stuff grows on the bottom, and you have to have it cleaned and scraped and everything else. Every couple of years you got to have it fouled and your zincs replaced. Anyway, try it out before you do it. But if you know you're going to do it, or know you want to do it, or you already have the experience, we'll move on to picking the right bus. Now, this is the first thing that I did a lot of research on, because I wasn't very familiar with buses. I didn't really pay that much attention to them, and I'd never worked with them. So understanding the difference between the lengths, the engine location, flat front versus dog nose, all of those things, I really had to think about it and look it up and weigh the pros and the cons. And you should too, because everybody's requirements are going to be different, right? Like if you've got a big family, you're probably going to want a really long bus. If it's just you, you can get by with a shorty, and there's some really cool builds out there for that. To me, that's too reduced space, and I have two older daughters that I want to be able to come and travel with me, and that hopefully at some point I find a partner. But until then, I'll probably just be me and a dog. But I want a little bit more space. I'm a decent-sized fella. Oh, you done it now. He's going to cry himself to sleep on his huge pillow. So it was important to me. But another thing is I want to travel to a lot of the national parks. Well, I want to travel to all of them. And they have parking restrictions. So I think 27 or 25 feet. If you're 25 feet, I think you meet all of the parking restrictions. So if you stay within that, you can park at all of them. That's pretty short to me. But a lot of them have up to like 33 or something, 33 or 35 feet, and then there's like 3 or 4 that, if you're, as long as you're 30 to 35 feet, you'll be able to get into a lot of them. So I was like, that's fine by me. I can drive into the other ones, or figure something out, and have that increased capacity. So that's the line of thinking that led me to what I chose. But we'll get into all of them. So I chose a flat front as well for the same reason. I wanted to reduce the length of the bus while maximizing the interior livable, usable space. With that said, I ended up with a front engine over a rear engine, and that was mainly because the right bus came along. There are different pros and cons to both of those, and I'll link a few articles and a quiz that'll help you. They're great resources. I definitely read through them, and others, forums and things. And there's more out there, videos and forums that you can go and get additional information if you want. But essentially, the dog knows what you're going to get with that is, one, you don't have 2 front wheel wells. Those are in the engine compartment, essentially. And so that makes the space up front easier to manage and less of a hassle. It's easier to work on your engine. You just pop the hood. It's all right there. So that's a benefit when it comes to maintenance and repairs and things of that nature. But what it does do is it elongates the bus without giving you usable living space. And so for me, I didn't want to do that. Like, I wanted to have a shorter bus with as much living space in between, so I ruled out a dog nose pretty quickly. Now, front engine to rear engine, with the front engine, you have, like, most people put the bed all the way in the back, and there's a rear door, and you can kind of have like an under garage back there. I don't know whether I'll end up doing that, but it's a very common layout, and it is functional and useful. And you don't get that with the rear engine. With the rear engine, you can have a bigger engine. You also have a wider wheelbase, which makes the ride smoother, but it makes it more unwieldy. So with the front engine, typically we'll have a shorter wheelbase, making it more maneuverable, so tighter turns, easier to get in and out of places. And that's what I ended up with. I ended up with a flat front engine, 33 feet long, so it's going to be ruled out of a few national parks, but overall it's small enough to get into a lot of them, and that's important for me. But the front engine to rear engine, the differences between that were negligible to me. Like, once again, the rear engine is quieter. You know, it's all the way in the back, so when you're driving and everything else, you don't really hear it. The front engine, it's right there, and you have that little dome in the front, and so it's much louder right there. But where it takes up and everything else, it's not a big deal to me, and I can ignore that front area, so to speak, as far as the livable space. I'm gonna redo the dash and make it look nice and fit with everything, but that's only gonna be utilized probably while driving. So keeping all of those things in mind, the other thing that you want to pay attention to, and this will go into, I'll do a separate video, or maybe I'll combine it, we'll see, I mean, you'll find out, is what to look for on a bus. The engine and transmission are important, you know, understanding whether you can get to highway speeds, if you're going to be traveling a whole lot. If you're going to be stationary, it's not as big of a deal. But the gearing, so to make sure, if you're going to be traveling, like I plan on traveling, like going to different states, national parks, back and forth, I'm going to put some miles on it. So I needed it to make sure that it could hit highway speeds. So I found one that had that already there. It also had cruise control. Anyway, we'll get into the nitty-gritty things to look for, pluses, minuses, essentials, nice to haves, in a different video. But keep in mind what you're going to be using it for, how you're going to be using it, and how many people are going to be in it. To me, I think it's crazy. I see families of 6 in buses, full-size buses. That's wild to me. Y'all are close. I'd murder my family if I was in that close proximity with them. Also, if you have a partner and you got that many, yeah, you do you. You guys are super close. I wouldn't do that. I think at that point that'd be too much for me. But, you know, it takes all kinds. So really focus on identifying what you want out of the bus. What's important to you? You know, do you want it to be quiet while you're driving as opposed to loud? Do you want it to be easy to work on? Like if you're a gearhead and you want to be tinkering around on the engine and everything else constantly, a dog nose might be for you. And if you don't really care, like you're only going to be in places that don't have any restrictions, you're boondocking almost exclusively or stationary, you know, a dog nose full-size bus might be what you want. Some of them look really cool. I think some of them look really silly though, like when they got the downward scoop all the way. I don't like that look, but some of those like late 80s, early 90s dog noses, they look rugged. I like them. I want that living space. So anyway, that's my recommendations. There's going to be some resources down in the comments to give you some more information or information in a different way than my rambling self. But yeah, go ahead, do all of the stuff, you know, hit the comments, like the channel, be a sub to a scribe, and let's go from there. Inevitably, I knew I was going to forget something. So other things to keep in mind, there's not just school buses out there. You have transit style buses and low floors. And I actually almost ended up with a Gillig low floor. And that appealed to me because they have a lot more height. I wouldn't have to do a roof raise with that, which school bus I am going to. And I got a high ceiling school bus too. I think it was, I think it's 6'4", 76 inches, I believe is that. And that's once I install, you know, foam in the roof and foam boards on the floor. I'm not going to be able to stand up straight. I'm 6'2". I already don't have much clearance in there. I'm going to lose, I think, between 6 and 8 inches once all of the material from the floor and the ceiling are on there. But the low floor bus has like 8 feet, something like that, clearance. It's tall in there. And the reason that I did not end up going that route was 2 main reasons. One being the clearance under the bus. It's real short. So if you're going to boondock or things of that nature, that's going to really limit you. And 2, the transmission on it was not an Allison. It was like a Houth or a, I can't remember the brand, but essentially they're good transmissions. Like from all my research, they're solid. The problem is you can't find parts for them, and it's hard to find people that work on them because they're so limited. They're like government issued or specialized transmissions. So those 2 things kind of caused me to not finalize that deal. The other thing though to keep in mind with the low floor is you're not putting anything under the bus. Like the thing with school buses is if you look underneath them, they have channels along the sides. There's 2 I-beams that run down the length, and off to the sides of those is great places for, you know, gray water tanks, propane tanks, underbody storage, things like that. And you don't have that with a low floor. Everything is going to be in the bus, and so you have to factor that into your floor plan. Your water tanks are all going to be in there. Your batteries, your electrical, all of it has to be factored into the bus itself. So you got to be pretty good at planning the floor plan, not just on the floor level, but also on the vertical plane, being able to cabinetry and everything else. And they also have tremendous wheel wells that you can't remove. Like they're stuck there, so that limits your floor plans as well. So just things to keep in mind. There are other bus options out there, and I mean, if you have the money, you could go with like an MCI or something like that. But I don't know, something like that. They make those into RVs pre-built, so those are not cheap typically, or if you get them cheap, they're super high mileage. So I kind of ruled those out. But anyway, I forgot to add that into the video, so snip snip. This will be edited in somewhere, maybe tacked on the end, depending on how it goes. But just wanted to throw that in there. Let me check my notes, see if there's anything else that I missed, so like a big dumb dummy. No, I think we're good.